the camaraderie, the people around you. Even as an engineer, you're not producing, but you're listening. I feel like we're kind of losing out because it's so piecemeal. We're losing that factor. Some of the best, I think, drum sounds that I think I got was, again, a mistake. My understanding was they were going to go in there, they were going to rehearse, and they came and they said, this room is too small. I go, what are you talking about? So there was a miscommunication going on. I said, but since we booked it for a couple of weeks, let's record everything and keep the drums as a reference.
My guest this week is my old friend, 17-time Grammy winner Benny Faccone. Benny has a rich credit history with artists like Mana, Santana, Ricky Martin, Luis Miguel, Sting, and so many more. He's a veteran of the old A&M Studios when it was one of the hottest recording facilities in Los Angeles. That's where he honed his recording and mixing skills under old-school legends like Bruce Swedien, Shelly Yakus, and Don Hahn. He's also a die-hard analog guy, still mixing on a real console and using real outboard gear when he can. During the interview, we talked about learning from industry legends, the plugins he uses and why, converting his studio to solar energy, getting caffeine poisoning from too much coffee, and much more. I spoke with Benny from his studio just outside of Los Angeles. Now that everybody has a home studio and you have a really nice one in your garage, probably way beyond what most people have or even think about, you come from an era where you record and mix in a big facility with multiple studios. Is there something that you miss about that?
Yeah, the camaraderie, the people around you, I don't want to use the word social aspect of it, but there's something about when you're especially tracking in the room with other people and there's ideas that come up. There's, even as an engineer, you're not producing, but you're listening as the producer is thinking about arrangement or performance. The engineer in there is thinking about sounds, which is all part of the whole picture. Even though the important thing is the song, but it's that development of the song. I think that I feel like we're kind of losing out because it's so piecemeal that everything is done exactly the way it's supposed to be, but not to the point of like experimenting. So we're losing that factor, on the tracking, on the recording side. On the mixing side, I personally like it a lot more because it's a lot easier. You don't have to deal with people sitting behind you or whatever. But there's all these things as a mixer, whether you're trying to do even as little as panning it one way or another or trying certain things, that when you send out the mix, you get all these comments like, can you try panning the conga instead of to the left or pan it to the right? You say, well, I've tried that, but the reason why, there's a lot of explanations to do when they're not there actually seeing it being developed and why you did this or why you did that. They just think of it, well, this is the way I hear it in my head and it's going to be, and that's it. So I miss all that creative stuff that, even I remember tracking with Mana, and I still have pictures of it that I still find unbelievable. We're at, Henson. This was 2001 or 2002. I've got a picture of literally 20 snares on the floor waiting to be which one to check out. Cymbals, different sounds of cymbals, brighter, darker, whatever, even though we don't know what the at the end of the song is going to be, but it's all about as a mixer engineer thinking down the road is trying to capture the best sound and what snare would fit with what's happening, with that track that you're recording.
But it's fitting with the track that you're recording now, and then that doesn't really take into account any kind of overdubs that might happen or changes down the road.
You're right, but but we were tracking 3-4 people at the same time. So the meat and potatoes of the song, even though you may replace the guitar or the bass even, but the meat and potatoes of the song is already there. So you have an idea which snare will work, whether it's going to be deep, thick, or whatever. Today, it's like the drummer, you send the drummer a track, and, they'll do it the way they think, which would be totally different than the end result. You're right. Some of the best, I think, drum sounds that I think I got was, again, a mistake, or I guess you call it a mistake. When we did them on our record, the Niños record, which was their biggest album, Donde Jugar, or whatever, the Niño, it had like 7 or 8 singles. We talked about, we went to, remember the old Devonshire Studios?
Sure, yeah.
Which is a great studio. But we went to the middle room, not the big room. And my understanding was they were going to go in there. They were going to rehearse, as a track, and we were going to record it, and then go to East West, which was, or Cello or Ocean Way back then, which we used to like to go to. And they came and they said, "This room is too small." I go, "What are you talking about?" I go, "Well, we're going to record. We're going to record the drums and everything." I said, "Oh, I didn't know that. I thought this was happening." So there was a miscommunication going on. I said, "But since we booked it for a couple of weeks, let's record everything and keep the drums as a reference." So we actually recorded everything and then went to Ocean Way back then and recorded the drums on top of the song. That way we knew exactly what sounds we were looking for. And the blends and everything fit in really well with what's going on. And not that I ever worked with Paul McCartney, but I heard he does the same thing with his bass parts. He puts his bass parts after the fact, not because of the bass sound, but the melodic basses that he used that goes with the song. So, yeah, it's hard when you don't know the final outcome.
You grew up in the A&M system. A&M Records, which is Henson, which is now sold to, who sold?
John Mayer.
John Mayer bought it, yeah.
Yeah, and another guy, I think a movie producer.
Yeah, but that being said, it was a wonderful facility and there was always a lot going on.
Yeah.
And when you were just starting the business, you were there a lot and you worked with a lot of great engineers and producers. Was there one that you learned the most from?
Yeah, Bruce Swedien. Bruce Swedien, he was a big influence on me, even though he probably didn't know it at the time, because he came in right after Thriller. And here we are, I'm right next to him, and we're doing a Sergio Mendes record. And I just watched everything that he did. And the things that he did weren't that, different than what a normal person would do, but he had such amazing ears, and some of his techniques that he did with, for example, the hi-hat. He had a piece of wood that he put between the snare and the hi-hat, like a square piece that's held up by a mic stand to get a little more separation between the hi-hat and the snare. Little things like that he did that were just, it's like, interesting, it's nothing like kind of a thing. But when you see it done, it's just genius little things that you don't realize. I heard, remember the Four Seasons?
Yeah, sure.
Big Girls Gone. Yeah. A friend of mine was Bob Crow, who was the producer and wrote all their songs. He was his assistant. He said, they would record, and he had a special piece of plywood that has to be underneath the drummer, because for some reason it gives a specific sound that he likes. Now, Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I mean, but that piece of plywood, different. So, the things that I learned there from people that are coming in, that their kind of mind, the way it works and what they do, you learn so many things that you that I took with me. And there's things that I was able to duplicate, and there's things that I couldn't figure out how the hell they did it. For example, Bruce Swedien, his favorite outboard gear was Inovonics compressor. It looks like a 160X, one rack system.
Yeah, it's a broadcast compressor, yeah.
Whatever. I mean, the bass sounds that this guy got with Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones records, nobody else had that tight bottom end. And every night when he would leave, I would play with it. I couldn't get it for the life of me. I couldn't get it to sound as good as it did. So you kind of learn things and experiment, but it was always experimenting from what you see other people doing. So, I learned a lot from them. And, these guys they make it look so easy. It's like talking to, a golf pro, that hits the shot. They go, oh, all I do is this. It's like, damn, but it sounds so great. So yeah, but Bruce Swedien was definitely one of the ones. And, Umberto Gatica, who was there quite a bit, he was interesting. Not that different, but he was, a top guy. Tommy Vaccari, who I thought was an amazing engineer. He still is. He did all the R&B stuff. Actually, he even did the first Prince stuff before Prince became Prince. But all these guys, they would take you under their wing, and they were, the thing that I've learned from them is how nice they are, as opposed to the producers who come in that can be real assholes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a big part of, what we do as a service. In order to do the best job, you have to be a nice person.
Yeah.
People have to get along with you.
Well, that's one thing that I took away from, obviously there's no such thing as studio etiquette anymore, because there's no such thing as a studio environment, really, unless you go to Conway or whatever. And, they're taught those things still. The studio etiquette, that when you're in there, there's respect for people, even though the guy is an assistant engineer, he's not an important person in the room. He is an important person because he's what makes the session run. If there's a problem, or the good assistants, they would run the tape machine. Obviously, Bruce Swedien ran his own tape machine. You don't mess with him. He does everything himself. But there's a kind of, so everybody respects everybody's jobs. Even when I did, Barbra Streisand, the Broadway record, she didn't treat me like, oh, you're just a second engineer. No, everybody in the room is there to do a job. So there's etiquettes and there's things that are lost today that I really miss. When sometimes you go in a studio and it's like, they're totally lost in there. And, I expect them to be professional, and it's hard to think that way today.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, you occasionally go to a bigger studio in Conway.
Yeah.
I know you like. Has that changed at all? That environment, that studio etiquette?
To me, the only thing that's changed is the fact that trying to get used to their stereo monitors again. Yeah. Because now I bring my own tannoys or whatever also, so it makes it easy. But it's still the same. It's like when you walk in, everything, the way they train their assistant. I don't think they train him as good, because back then you make one mistake, you're gone. Now, that there's leeway and stuff, but going back to what I learned, even if they make mistakes or whatever, it's trying to be respectful and not think of them as just grunts or whatever. And especially when musicians start to abuse like a second engineer and say, hey, do this or do that. It's like, come on, we're all in here to have fun. That's what the important thing is. And when you walk into that studio, it could be intimidating if you've never done it before. But it's great.
Now, that being said, you do sessions all over the world.
Used to.
Well, used to, but even so, you go out of town, you go to Latin America a lot to record. In Spain, I remember you telling me you went to.
Yeah, go to Madrid a lot and London.
How did you find the studios? London be different because I know you went to Abbey Road, but how about the studios in other places, in other parts of the world? How did you find them?
The hardest thing about going to those other studios is the lack of the great gear that we have here or at Abbey Road or whatever. It's, it's like anything else. And it took me a while to figure it out. Why do all these mixers or engineer always like to go to the same place? Because this type of equipment they're so used to. And that's what's great about when you have your own house or you build your own studio, you have the equipment you want. When I'm doing a project and, it's time to mix, the first place I will call is Conway because I liked, and I was comfortable in Studio B, mixing in that room. I know what I hear in there. I'm comfortable with the kind of gear that I have. I just have to rent maybe, APIs, things that I'm missing. But if that place was booked, I'd start to panic because you have to go somewhere else. And it's like going places that you're not used to or comfortable with and you have to put out.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing. That's what's great about today. What I love about coming in, your own place. And, it's about, the only nice thing is that pressure, less pressure.
I remember the small mix rooms at A&M. They had the Allen Sides monitors. Remember
in
those?
Mix 1, yeah, they had the Allen Sides monitors.
Did you ever mix in there, and how did you find it?
Well, it's not the Oceanway speakers of today, which are totally different. Back then, they're so hi-fi back then that they're so clear that you have to be used to them. You can hear everything, and they sound so amazing. Just like for me, if I have to work on Genelecs, I worry because they sound so good that you don't have to work as hard. But when you take them out, they don't sound like they do when I'm here in the studio. That's why I fell in love with the Tannoys and even NS10s per se, because you get used to certain things. And if you're not used to something and have to mix, that's where I'd freak out and start to kind of doubt myself. So is the bottom end okay? Well, then, you put it on the big speakers and you crank it. Yeah, the bottom end's okay, but is it real? So all this stuff that goes through your minds. But, the only thing is like when I do go into those places now, I've almost lost touch with what I'm hearing, but the gear is, you can't beat that gear at, East West Studio 2, that old Neve, what is it, 8038 or 78? There's no way you can make that sound bad. It's such a great sounding console, so.
You're talking about monitors. I use Amphions, which I really like.
I've never heard of them.
And, I've been using them for a while. I did a session at a friend's studio, and he had them. I was so impressed that I got a pair, and I fell in love with them. But a company, a very high-end monitor speaker company, came to me recently and said, "What if we park a set of one of our speakers at your place on loan?" And I said no. And the reason why is like I don't want to learn a whole new set of speakers again, and that break-in period, until you really get used to it. It's like I know what I got here. It sounds good, it works good. Why should I change?
That was the secret that like every mixer, every engineer, if you're not really taught, you kind of just learn it on your own. And that's one thing that I learned to my own. I go, oh, I should just stay in one place because you get comfortable as opposed to, going to, Henson one day to mix or going, to East West another day, go to Conway. It really is scary because you're not really sure. And after a while, I would start to go to Conway, and the gear that I have now, it was all separate. It wasn't even cases. I would just bring it there and set it up. We're talking about two 160s and the SPX 90, which Conway still doesn't have. I don't know why, but that kind of stuff. So yeah, in terms of the speakers, I have even some of my students. They say, what do you think of these speakers? What do you think of these? And I'd say, whatever you're comfortable with. That whatever you hear is what you hear going out there. That's what you should stick with. People I know don't like tannoys. It's all what you're used to, for sure.
You're still an analog guy. There's an analog console behind you. There's a big Trident behind you. And
automated.
You have a lot of outboard gear as well. Mm-hmm. Analog outboard gear. Do you have permanent setups where you're going I know the bass is always going through this channel, it's going to this compressor, it's going to EQ, and pretty much what it's going to be. Do you do that?
It's in fader 1, snares in fader 2, toms, everything is there. And let me see if I can show you my snake pit over there, all the patch cords.
Yeah.
That does not get moved. We got all, the signal path. I know a lot of mixers do that because it's no matter, I don't know what it is, but it kind of works where so long as the level going in is always the same, that for example, the bass, if you send, I always send the bass in at 0, and I look at my VU meter sending in and adjust it on Pro Tools, that the compression works. Now, some may compress a little more, a little less, but it all depends on the dynamics of the performance in terms of, some of the sounds, but it just works, and I don't have to touch any outboard gear. My signal path for vocals, I've got 7 or 8 things going through it. And I know, a lot of people have their own thing, whether it's plugins or not. And it always works. Because what we used to get, and not so much now, but to a point, is the sound of the instrument of the musician and what made it different. What we brought out is just trying to squeeze out the juice and make it sound whatever we're getting, as opposed to today, you have such a horrible, I'm talking in general, obviously. Mm-hmm. You get this horrible thin sound with 6 plugins on there, and, you take it out to try and get a better sound, and there's no sound there. Whether it's a line guitar that they use all plugins or that kind of stuff. So it's a little different today, trying to go through your routing and get a good sound, because the good sound should come from the recording. You're just trying to control it or bring it out or whatever you're trying to do.
Well, to some degree, a mixer's job has changed because you're a fix-it person as well. For people that record at home and don't really have great technique or they can't get great sounds, they don't have gear that's up to par. So you got to fix it.
Well, there used to be a saying, right? It says, we'll fix it in the mix.
Yeah.
And then we'll fix it in mastering.
Yeah. Right.
Now we say, heck with it. It's fine the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very true. And I would get, when I did some sessions with some couple of big artists, that, the producer will come in and say, okay, let's open up a Pro Tools track and put your signal path, what plugins you use. I go, I don't know, plugins. I don't have that kind of a thing. You get a great mic, you get a great compressor, a great mic pre. What else do you need?
Yeah. That's really
Even
old school.
Yeah. Oh no, they have to put auto tune on it because they don't sing in tune. Oh no, you have to put a delay on it. You have to hide everything, because if not, then it's going to sound horrible. But and then the point is it's not a vocal performance anymore. Now it's effects performance. You have a Julio Iglesias record where it's all reverbs.
Yeah.
if not, then it sounds horrible.
Yeah. Right. Well, you just mentioned plugins. I know that you do use some. Mm-hmm. So what do you use, and what do you use them on?
I've got a certain set of outboard gear that I always use, like for the important things. For example, bass, kick, snare, vocals, certain solo guitars or things that are important in the song. And a lot of other stuff, I use compressors, but I just use an 1176 or Fairchild. I don't get fancy, and there's so many plugins. Like, what do you use? I do hear the only difference I hear in a compressor, the Fairchild, and I don't have the Universal Audio. I just have the basic Pro Tools plugins and all that. So I don't have, and so the Fairchild does give a little bit of fatness to it, not obviously like a real Fairchild, but I don't hear that much of a difference in using one plugin to another. So an 1176, I mainly use those, cause I'm used to it, but I love using effects, with plugins like the, the Echo Boy, Crystallizer, H Delay, and I still use the original Pro Tools, delays that come with the actual program. I love those things.
Yeah.
They're delays, So but I don't, and I guess I'm old school where I try not to change a sound too much, because if they recorded it that way, that's what they want. So I don't change it. I try and emphasize it, or if it's missing a groove or whatever and it needs a plug-in like a delay or a harmonizer, or, I love harmonizers. I love flangers. It kind of not enough to make it feel like it's an obvious thing, but just to give it a feel and a groove. That's what I use plugins for. So I'm mainly more of, I hate to use the word like natural sounds, but just very, to go crazy on them. If I was a producer, or if a producer was in the room and want to do it, sure. But if I'm reinventing the song, then, who knows, I can get into so much trouble sending out to them and they're going, what the hell did you send me? So I try and be, respectful for the song and what it is. And again, I do mainly similar things. I don't do heavy metal. Not that I don't want to, but usually you heavy metal guys won't send me stuff. So I do the basic, the pop or the ballad pops or that kind of stuff. So it's very, very similar music. Well, so it makes it easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Because you have a big console and outboard gear. And I assume you keep your console on all the time, like most people do. That sucks up all.
That's a good question, though. Let me ask you, because I've asked so many technical people when I go to. This was back when I go to Conway, and I ask all these guys, is it better to keep them on or turn it off? And some people will say turn it off because it could burn the relays or, the whatever and make it too hot. But some people say, no, definitely keep it on, because that's the point of having analog gear, to keep everything consistent and hot. Yes. Almost like when you're using a tube mic. A lot of people, they turn on and they go, but you need a couple of minutes to have the tubes turned on to make it sound great.
Yeah.
So right. I don't know.
Well, what I've always heard, and I have an electronics background, so I believe this, it's better to keep it on. And the reason why is every time you turn the power supply on, after you've turned it off, there's a spike in voltage. And that spike in voltage is not good. The transformers are okay. It's not good for the big capacitors inside.
Yeah.
And that's what
makes sense.
Yeah. And then, of course, when the capacitors go bad, you start to get a hum. So that's why general wisdom is to keep it on all the time.
Yeah.
That being said,
that problem with a power failure where it spiked and it actually blew my power amp.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it cost like $5,000 to fix it. Before, I was naive when I didn't realize that I could have bought a brand new power supply for the Trident that they still sell for $3,000. I spent $5,000 to fix it. The guy wanted 10. I said, no, you're ripping me off. So I paid him $5,000.
But it works now. Did he do any mods by any chance?
Good question. I did a lot of mods. Well, starting from the individual modules, Ben Omeay, who's a genius electronic wizard, he does all the gear for Bernie Grundman. He built and designed all their consoles, modifies everything. He modified all my gear except for a couple of the 1176s that I want the 1176 sound, or, the stereo compressors or this kind of stuff. All my DBX 160s, 160Xs, they're all modified. And they just sound better. They sound cleaner. And he also, in some of these modules, cleaned it up in the sense of, certain things it's like a guitar amp, when you buy like a Vox, point-to-point wiring sounds the best rather than doing all that stuff. And he does the same thing for some of my modules. So my bass module, my vocal module, he modified those so it'd be more like cleaner and point-to-point and that kind of stuff. And he cleaned my center section, and just like he does, I've got his Yamaha, I forget the model number, the power amp, that he totally took out everything other than what is needed, which is basically the volume control and whatever makes it, the volume, the meter, all that stuff he deactivated because it took away all the great sound from that amp. So he did that, but I used to mix a lot also at not Design Effects, LA Effects. Danny Vaccaro's place, and he had a great API console. I think they just sold it last year. The studio used to be the original NRG studio, housed in North Hollywood. And they had this guy, Steve Ferlot, who he was like the API genius guy. And he's always talking about his blocks and his, how everything is. So when I got this Trident, I talked to him, and he put, what he calls you see that box over there? The gray box?
Yeah.
It's there, he calls them his blocks. What it is, it's basically bypassed the whole center section.
Wow.
The whole center my whole center section does not work. It's totally bypassing, goes straight from the stereo bus straight to whatever my stereo output.
But you have a monitor control, right?
Yeah, I have a monitor, but he put a separate monitor control right here.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
So it's and it goes to his box.
Yeah.
And so what it does, and the difference that it made, first of all, the Tridents, they have a nice bottom end. They don't have a great top end. It's not as, sparkly or whatever, more of the British sound, but the bottom end just went whoop, down, and the top end was clear. It didn't bring up that sparkle that you miss from the Neves and, those old consoles. But also, what he did was, and a lot of people don't realize, especially the new kids, there's such a thing as called panning. We always hear stuff, and including myself, you have a boombox. We don't realize that there's actually a whole wide world of 180 degrees that, it's like a painting. Back in the old days, we had to think about those things too. So panning is a big part of it. But the stereo imaging in Pro Tools, it's totally stereo, but you hear it almost, when you compare it, you hear it like this. It's almost like a 9 and 3 o'clock. And with this, what he did, modifying it, opened up the console. Literally, it's opened. You can't see my hands, but it's opened up 180 degrees. So you can actually, the panoramic view, it went from watching a movie at home to watching in Cinematoscope, remember, or CinemaScope, whatever.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It just made it amazing.
Cool.
And talk about modifying. Benno came in and he gave me his special speaker cables. So yeah, a lot of stuff in here has been modified for sure.
But one of the big things is you changed to solar in order to power the studio.
Yeah, for economy wise, yeah.
And it
definitely
worked, right?
Well, to tell you, just before I get into the solar part, you know what really worked? Because I had a studio in Hollywood. Obviously, you don't want power coming directly from whatever AC cable. You want clean power. It's not like, today you plug in and it is what it is, but you don't want buzzes. Those are the worst part about a studio is when you get the buzz, somebody turns on a light and then all of a sudden you have a buzz and you're trying to figure it out. So you always want clean power. And even coming from when I had a studio in Hollywood, my clean power came from Robbie Rosso, who had the studio in the front. From his, I sent a special line from him. We went through a transformer, which cleaned the power. And from there, I took my power from, which made it, I didn't have to worry about buzzes, nothing. When I came to the studio here in Westlake, it was a pre-made studio already, and they had a transformer, so everything was clean power. And when I built the room here, that was my main concern, is thinking I want clean power. I want it to come from, the street, whatever. So basically it came directly from the circuit panel or the circuit breaker board outside into, I got a transformer that it cleans the power into here. But what I found here, because literally, like my wall back there, let me see, if you could see, the back wall is literally the back of my garage wall or the side wall. So right on the other side is my panel.
Oh, yeah.
So the length from the panel to here is so much shorter that I crank up the volume all the way and I barely hear any noise.
Wow.
Because sometimes you don't think about it, even when you're mixing, even though you think you're digital, but there's so much noise that we don't hear because we're not hearing it, the way the true stereo or whatever. All those microphones, the noises, all the buzzes, all these little things, they add up. So that's one thing that I'm fortunate enough to find out about after all this is how clean the power is, and especially going from, such a short distance.
Well, it should be clean if you're using solar and it's going to a battery.
Well, I'm not.
Oh,
and
okay.
What happened was I went solar, but it affected my whole house, meaning in a way where now I have solar power. So it affected my economy of the electricity bill big time, where it was very expensive, but now it went cheaper. But I still had my console on at night when there was no solar. So I got battery power. I got solar power. But when they plugged it in, they didn't plug it into my circuits for the studio, because they said that it can only do 8 or 9 circuit breakers, and I had to pick the ones. So I'm in the process of trying to change that around. So I don't think it's changed the sound. It's more changed my pocketbook.
Well, that's not so bad either.
Well, if you think about it today, instead of spending one day mixing, I'll spend 3-4 days. I don't care. But those 3-4 days, electricity, everything adds up.
Sure. Yeah.
It adds up.
I want to talk to you about a thing that I just find so fascinating, not in a good way, but it's fascinating nonetheless. You're one of the few people I know that got caffeine poisoning. I know you love coffee, and you've always had a cup of coffee in your hand. And
yes, I do.
It got out of control on one project, right?
Yeah. I think, one mainly. The other one had to do with other substances we won't talk about, but yeah. Yeah, no, I grew up when I went to A&M. My mentor, Don Hahn, who was a coffee drinker also, my main thing more than anything else, more than setting up mics, making sure the sessions ran, is that I always had a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. So every 10 minutes or so, I'd have to go get a cup of coffee, no matter whether he drank it or not, and always had to make a fresh pot, because when he tasted it, and God forbid it would tasted bad, he would like let you know it. So we were always drinking coffee. I mean, I was drinking 15 cups a day, you know. It's like water. I still kind of drink 3 or 4, but when I went to Miami and I was doing a Julio Iglesias session for like 5 days I was there, that I needed coffee. So over there, it's like Italy. You know, when you get coffee, you don't get mugs or whatever like here. Like you get these little cups, one sip and it's done. So they would have these things called cortaditos, which are Cuban coffee. And it's made out of really strong espresso with about half a pound of sugar in each cup. And I'm exaggerating the half a pound, but it was sweet and it was amazing. But one sip and you're done. So every morning I would say, you know, when I come in, when we start, I'd have like 10 or 15 cups behind me. So I would just take a sip as if I'd have a big mug. And I was drinking so much of it and it was so good that when I came back here, I went back to Starbucks and I almost like got sick. It tasted so bad, but I needed that caffeine because after all that espresso, that I was getting withdrawals, and I literally was getting, not a panic attack, but just like shakes and stuff like that, where I couldn't go in and I couldn't mix the song. There was one song that they needed for Julio Iglesias, not just the Cuatro Lunas, I think it was called. It was like all orchestral. We did it at Abbey Road, 60 musicians. It's like this big thing. And I said, I can't. I was like in my backyard, sitting in the sun with a blanket over me, like a little old lady going, you know, like getting the shakes, and I couldn't sleep, and it was horrible. And that's when actually, they didn't want to wait for me. So I won't mention who mixed it, but somebody else mixed it. And, it wasn't, put it this way, it wasn't what we thought it was. It wasn't as good because they kind of missed the idea of what the song was supposed to be. So, after I came back, I remixed it, but, you know, obviously people don't wait for you unless there's a reason. And that's what happened. I just couldn't do anything. I was OD'd. I couldn't sleep. I was the shakes, and I didn't even know there was such a thing as a caffeine overdose.
Yeah, I guess you got it.
Oh boy, did I get it.
Yeah.
I learned really fast.
I stopped drinking coffee a really long time ago, and I used to drink a lot, but not like you. But I went on a juice fast for at least a week, and it might have been longer. And when I came off it, I had my first cup of coffee, and my first sip, it tasted so bad, I've never had coffee since.
Well, you tasted the wrong type of coffee, though.
It could be, but it was just so sour. It's like, oh, I'm done. So I've gone to 2 coffee plantations since then, one in Costa Rica and one in Colombia. Best places for coffee, right? And 3, because another one in Canary Islands. And in every case, we'd go through and they'd show us how they pick it and everything. And then at the end, they'd roast a fresh pot of coffee from the beans that were, you know, right there, and then roasted and everything, as fresh as you can possibly have. So everybody around me is just going orgasmic over this, going, I've never tasted coffee this good, blah, blah, blah. And I have a sip and go,
Well, it definitely is an acquired taste, but some of the coffee, I mean, I'm starting to experiment on Italian coffees, Danesi and all this stuff. Compared to the crap that we have here, I mean, even the stuff that they ship here, you know, is different. But it definitely, you got to go searching. It's almost like gourmet what you're finding.
All right, last question, Benny. So you haven't been on the podcast for 5 years. It's a long time. and things change.
In no man's terms, yes.
So I asked you this before, and just curious, if this has changed for you. Yeah. What's the best piece of advice that maybe you learned along the way or somebody imparted to you?
Oh, gosh. In the last 5 years, I'm trying to
Or any time, for that matter.
Well, definitely, obviously, best piece of advice is, don't record or mix with your head. It's always about feel. That's my number one thing. It could be the worst sound that you can ever have, but if it feels good, if there's some vibe to it, that's what I feel is missing today. Some kind of vibe. Everything is so sterile and perfect that it's hard to kind of, just be different. And a lot of people want you to sound like Taylor Swift or sound like Ed Sheeran or sound like Bruno Mars or whatever. But, you are who you are. And same thing with mixers and recording engineers and producers. They all have their own sound, and they go by their gut, by their heart, and not by their head. And I tell a lot of people also, when we're talking about mixing, is that mixing isn't about your fingers or your head, it's your heart. And what comes from the heart through your fingers, whether you're a guitar player or whether you're a mixer or drummer, it comes from the heart. And that's what I feel like we're losing that essence of what music is really all about. And finding that out by not being adventurous and just using the same plugins, making things easy rather than using a plugin to help you. It's become the crutch of, what saves you, kind of a thing. So, it's more about, whether you're recording real or not, it's whatever that actual sound is like trying to capture the best that you can out of feel. It sounds kind of weird saying that, but it's different than I think last time we talked about the difference between when you have sex with a doll and when you have sex with a real person,
There's a big difference.
Sex,
yes, right.
Big difference. Yeah. So you got to follow your heart all the time. You can't, don't follow your head.
Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.